Today I'll be making this beautifully spicy habanero mustard with these beautifully spicy mustard habaneros. If you don't happen to have mustard habaneros, then don't panic, you can totally make this with any chili pepper that you enjoy. Let's get adventurous. I've been planning on making this habanero mustard for a while. I love the bright, tangy pungency of mustard coupled with the heat and fruity flavour of habaneros. And I thought for this particular recipe, the most appropriate chili to use would of course be mustard habaneros. They've got plenty of heat, a lovely bright fruity flavour, and a beautiful deep mustard colour. So to that end, I've planted a mustard habanero plant, and for the last few months I've been diligently taking care of it, and now it's rewarded me with some beautiful ripe chili peppers. So I'll pick 4 of the biggest, ripest peppers that I've got, and that should be about perfect for this recipe. Mustard seeds commonly come in yellow, brown and black, but in my part of the world, yellow and black are most common, so that's what I'm working with. They both have a wonderful mustardy flavour, but the black ones tend to be a little more pungent. But regardless of what colour they are on the outside, they're all mustard coloured in the middle. So first up, I'm measuring out a half a cup of the yellow mustard seeds. And then another half a cup of the black ones. The pungency of mustard is caused by a reaction between an enzyme and another chemical inside the seeds. These chemicals are released and can combine when the seeds get crushed, and then the reaction starts to happen when we add some liquid. So the next step is to crush the seeds. Now, you can do this by hand in a mortar and pestle, just with a bit of brute force and elbow grease, but today I'm taking the lazy way out and using a spice grinder. Now I've left them slightly coarse. You can take these to a really fine powder if you want, but I like a little bit of texture in my mustard, so I've left them a little bit rough. And then I'm pouring those into a nice big jar. This one is somewhere around about a quart or 1 litre. Now if I taste a little bit of this ground mustard now, it tastes a little bit like mustard, but not really much else going on. There's no bite or pungency whatsoever, but that's because the enzyme reaction that causes the pungency needs a little bit of liquid to do its thing. And that enzyme reaction works best at cold temperatures, so one of the best things to do to maximize that pungency is to add a liquid that's really cold. So once we add some cold liquid to this, the enzyme reaction will start to work, and we should reach maximum pungency in around 10 to 15 minutes. Then following this, as the enzyme reaction continues, the pungency will slowly reduce over time. But we can lock in some of that pungency by reducing the enzyme activity, and we do this by adding an acid. So at the 10 to 15 minute mark, when that pungency is at its peak, I'll be adding some acid in the form of apple cider vinegar. So that should slow down the reaction to keep the mustard at its most potent. Now this next bit isn't strictly necessary, but to add in a subtle earthy background flavour and really boost the orange mustardy colour, I'm adding half a teaspoon of turmeric. I tend to cook with a lot of spices, so I really love these spice jars as a great way of keeping my spice cupboard organized. If you're interested in checking these out, there'll be a link down in the description for these spice jars, as well as a lot of the other kitchen equipment that I frequently use. So as I mentioned, we need to kick off that enzyme reaction by adding a really cold liquid. So what's a liquid that's nice and cold and will start off that enzyme reaction, but also add some lovely flavor and aroma? Well, what could be better than a nice frosty beer? I'm using a nice simple pale ale, but any beer that you like should be fine. Dark beers work really well with this. Because mustard can have a bit of a bitter edge, you might want to think about avoiding things like IPAs that have a really high bitterness, but feel free to experiment with whatever you think is going to taste nice. So now I'm carefully measuring out 1 cup of beer and then adding that to the mustard. So I'm just giving this a really quick stir to mix everything together, and then we'll wait 10 to 15 minutes for that reaction to happen. What am I going to do to fill time for 10 to 15 minutes? Ooh, I know, I'm going to finish that beer. Now that it's had a chance to do its thing, the idea here is to slow that reaction right down by adding something acidic. So to that end, I'm measuring out a cup of apple cider vinegar. Plain white vinegar would do, but I think for this purpose, apple cider vinegar has a slightly nicer flavor. And then I'm adding that to the beer and mustard mix and mixing it in really well. And now onto these beautiful mustard habaneros. To start with, I'm slicing these in half long ways, but because I want plenty of habanero flavour but not too much heat, I'm using a teaspoon to carefully scrape out the pith and the seeds. But if you want it a little bit hotter, you can leave these in. And then I'm placing each of those halves into the jar with the mustard. And yes, I should be wearing gloves, but hey, sometimes it's fun to live dangerously. And then on top of that, I'm adding 1 teaspoon of table salt. And then we're going to grab our whizzy wand and blend that until the habaneros are completely obliterated. Now, you can taste this now to see if you're happy with the balance of flavours, but there's a couple of things to keep in mind. One is that the crushed mustard seeds will continue to soften over the next couple of days, so right now it might seem a bit gritty. The other thing is that the flavour of mustard when it's freshly crushed can be a bit bitter, but this should fade over the next couple of days. I'm giving it a taste now anyway, and it's got a nice bit of acidity up front. There's some salt to balance and bring out the flavours, and whew, yep. That's got some kick to it. It seems pretty good so far, but I'm going to pop this in the fridge and let it sit for a couple of days to mellow out and let the flavours mingle. But I think in a couple of days, this is going to be really, really good.
3 days later.
So this has now been in the fridge for 3 days. It's now fully hydrated, it's thickened up, and it's looking and smelling really nice. So now it's time for a taste test, and you know what that means. It's time to break out the dino nuggies.
Rawr. Rawr. Clever girl.
Now let's give this a nice generous dipping and see what we're working with. Whew, yeah, that's the stuff. A big pungent hit from that mustard, followed by a beautiful mustardy tang. You get the flavour and aroma of the beer kind of lurking in the background, and then the nice punchy lingering heat of those habaneros. That is an absolutely cracking mustard, and this time I'm going to go for a much bigger scoop. And whoo, yeah, that hits the spot. If you're into spicy condiments, check out this video next, where as an experiment, I make a hot sauce by fermenting chili peppers in fish sauce, with some really interesting results. And if you liked this video, hit the like button, subscribe for more, and until next time, happy snacking.